There are moments in life when something interrupts the ordinary flow of our days, a delay, a disappointment, a door that closes without explanation, a relationship that shifts, a sudden unease in the quiet of night. We call these things coincidence. We call them bad luck. We call them misfortune. But what if they were something else? What if they were messages? What if God tried to reach you? Not once, but 7 times. The first time was gentle, a whisper in your conscience, a quiet nudge telling you that the path you were walking was not built for your soul. But you were busy. The world was loud. Ambition spoke louder than conviction. So the whisper faded. The second time came through disappointment. Something you wanted deeply slipped through your fingers. You felt confused, maybe even betrayed. But what if that closed door was protection? What if the thing you lost was never meant to shape your destiny? Yet instead of asking why it was removed, you only asked why it was taken. The third time arrived in the form of restlessness. Even after success, even after progress, something felt incomplete. You achieved what you prayed for, yet peace did not follow. That unease was not punishment, it was invitation, a reminder that the soul was designed for more than achievement. The fourth time came through people, a conversation, a sermon, a sentence in a book, a stranger's words that struck deeper than expected. Truth brushed against your heart, but pride is a skilled defender. It convinced you that you already knew enough. The fifth time was silent. Prayers seemed unanswered. Heaven felt distant. You thought God had stepped away. But sometimes silence is not absence. It is space. Space to notice what truly matters. Space to realize how much you depend on His voice. The sixth time came through hardship, a shaking of foundations, a loss, a failure, a humbling moment. Pain has a strange ability to open ears that comfort keeps closed. In weakness, illusions fall apart. You begin to see how fragile self-reliance truly is. And then, the seventh time is different. It is not louder. It is clearer. By now, patterns are visible. You begin to notice how every interruption was not random. Every delay carried mercy. Every redirection held intention. You start to understand that God was not trying to harm you. He was trying to save you from choices that would wound you, from paths that would shrink your soul, from becoming less than you were created to be. Why 7 times? Because love persists, because mercy repeats itself, because God does not give up as quickly as we do. 7 in Scripture often symbolizes completion, not perfection achieved by man, but work completed by God. Perhaps He reached you 7 times because He was completing something in you, breaking something false, building something eternal. You thought you were being blocked. In truth, you were being guided. You thought you were being ignored. In truth, you were being pursued. You thought you were alone. In truth, you were being pursued. The question is not whether God has tried to reach you. The question is, will you listen the 8th time? Because there will be another moment, another whisper, another interruption that feels inconvenient. And when it comes, you will recognize it. Something inside you will pause, and you will remember that none of this was accidental. God does not shout to control. He speaks to invite. He does not force doors open. He redirects hearts. And if He tried 7 times, it is not because you are stubborn beyond hope. It is because you are loved beyond measure. There is something profoundly mysterious about the way God speaks. We expect thunder, but He often chooses a whisper. We look for writing in the sky, but He writes upon the conscience. The first attempts of God to reach a person are rarely dramatic. They are subtle, almost fragile, a quiet discomfort when you are about to say something unkind, a hesitation when you consider stepping into something that promises pleasure but feels slightly misaligned, a gentle inner resistance when you justify a decision that benefits you but diminishes someone else. These moments are easy to ignore because they do not force themselves upon us. They do not interrupt our schedules or rearrange our plans. They simply nudge. And yet within that nudge lies something eternal. The tragedy is not that God fails to speak clearly. The tragedy is that we have trained ourselves to value noise over nuance. The modern world celebrates volume. The loudest opinion wins. The strongest desire dominates. The quickest gratification is praised as wisdom. In such an atmosphere, the whisper of God feels almost out of place. It does not compete. It does not argue. It simply presents truth and waits. That waiting can be mistaken for weakness, but it is actually a sign of respect. God does not overpower the will he created. He honors it even when it resists him. The conscience is one of the most sacred spaces within a human being. It is not merely a psychological mechanism shaped by culture. It is a quiet witness planted in the soul. When you feel that internal check, when something inside you says, this is not right, even if everyone around you approves, that is not accidental. That is the first gentle reaching. Yet we often reinterpret that discomfort. We call it anxiety. We call it overthinking. We call it insecurity. Rarely do we pause long enough to ask whether it might be guidance. There is a peculiar skill we develop as we grow older, the skill of silencing conviction. The first time we ignore it, it stings. The second time, it stings less. Eventually, the voice becomes faint, not because it has stopped speaking, but because we have lowered its volume through repetition of disregard. But even then, it does not entirely disappear. It waits beneath the surface, ready to rise again when we are honest enough to listen. It is important to understand that divine whispers are rarely accusatory in tone. They are not cruel reminders of failure. They are invitations toward alignment. When you sense that something is off, it is not necessarily condemnation. It may be correction wrapped in kindness. The whisper does not say, you are worthless. It says, you are made for better. That distinction changes everything. Condemnation pushes you into hiding. Conviction draws you into light. One produces shame. The other produces clarity. But clarity requires humility, and humility is not fashionable. We prefer certainty, even when it is false, over doubt that leads to truth. So when the whisper challenges our certainty, we defend ourselves instead of examining ourselves. We argue internally. We gather excuses. We construct narratives that protect our image. And in doing so, we miss the mercy embedded in the interruption. Consider how many regrets begin with a moment of hesitation that was dismissed. A relationship pursued despite inner warning. A habit embraced despite quiet resistance. A compromise made despite subtle unease. Rarely does ruin arrive without notice. More often, it is preceded by a whisper we chose to ignore. This does not mean that every uncomfortable feeling is divine instruction, but it does suggest that not every discomfort should be dismissed. There is wisdom in pausing when something within you stirs unexpectedly. The whisper is gentle because love is gentle. Force may produce compliance, but it cannot produce devotion. God seeks more than outward obedience. He seeks a willing heart, and willingness cannot be coerced. It must awaken. That awakening often begins with something so small that we overlook it. A fleeting thought urging patience, a quiet prompting to apologize, a subtle discomfort about the direction we are taking. These are not grand revelations. They are seeds, and seeds by nature are unimpressive at first glance. Yet within them lies the potential for transformation. If nurtured, a whisper can grow into wisdom. If ignored, it can become a memory that haunts. The beauty of the whisper is that it proves God is near even when he is not loud. It reveals that divine communication is not confined to extraordinary experiences. It happens in traffic, in conversation, in decision-making, in solitude. It happens in the small spaces where character is formed. Where we learn to recognize these whispers, life changes subtly but powerfully. We become slower to judge, quicker to reflect, more attentive to the state of our own hearts. We begin to see interruptions not as inconveniences, but as possible guidance. The first attempt of God to reach you may not have looked like a miracle. It may have looked like a moment of hesitation, a quiet thought you almost dismissed, a subtle discomfort you rationalized away. But in that small stirring was evidence of a love patient, enough to speak softly. The question is not whether the whisper exists. It is whether we will cultivate the stillness required to hear it. There are few experiences more confusing than watching something you deeply desired slip out of your hands. You prayed for it, planned for it, imagined your future with it woven neatly into place. Then, without warning, the door closed. The opportunity vanished. The relationship shifted. The plan unraveled. In that moment, it feels less like guidance and more like rejection. It feels personal. It feels unfair. Yet, what if some closed doors are not expressions of divine refusal, but acts of divine protection? What if the very thing you mourned was the very thing that would have diminished you? We are remarkably skilled at mistaking desire for destiny. If we want something intensely enough, we begin to assume it must be right. Passion becomes proof. Persistence becomes justification. And when the path is blocked, we interpret it as opposition rather than intervention. But not every obstacle is an enemy. Some are guardians standing at the entrance of a road you were never meant to travel. Protection rarely feels like protection at first. It feels like loss. It feels like embarrassment. It feels like standing outside while others seem to move forward. There is a peculiar pain in watching someone else receive the very thing you prayed for. It tempts you to question your worth or your faith, but worth is not measured by access, and faith is not proven by getting everything you ask for. Sometimes faith is trusting that a closed door carries wisdom you cannot yet see. Consider how limited our perspective truly is. We see the present moment, colored by emotion and expectation. We do not see the hidden consequences attached to our desires. We cannot foresee the subtle ways a certain environment might corrode our character, or how a particular relationship might slowly shrink our sense of self. We often evaluate opportunities by their immediate appeal rather than their long-term impact. God, however, is not confined to immediacy. What appears promising today may carry seeds of regret tomorrow. A door that opens easily is not automatically a door that leads to life, and a door that closes firmly is not necessarily one that leads to despair. There are times when what we call a setback is, in truth, the rescue. Imagine pursuing something with relentless determination, only to discover years later that it would have trapped you in a version of yourself you were never meant to become. At the time, you would have called its removal cruel. Later, you would call it mercy. The difficulty lies in living between those two realizations. In the present, when the loss is fresh, gratitude feels impossible. The mind replays what could have been. The heart resists the idea that good might be hidden in disappointment. Yet disappointment has a revealing quality. It exposes where we have placed our hope. If the closing of one door shatters your sense of identity, it may be that your identity was resting too heavily upon that outcome. Protection sometimes involves dismantling false foundations before they harden into permanent structures. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is a quiet redirection, an email that never comes, a call that ends abruptly, a plan that simply does not align despite your effort. These moments test your interpretation. Will you see only absence, or will you consider intention? The assumption that every desired opportunity is meant for you places enormous pressure on outcomes. It suggests that success equals approval and denial equals neglect. But love does not function on such shallow equations. A parent who pulls a child away from a busy street is not withholding joy, they are preserving life. In the same way, a closed door may be shielding you from consequences you would not survive intact. This does not mean that every lost opportunity was dangerous or destructive. It means that you do not possess the full map. You are walking a path whose intersections you cannot yet comprehend. There is humility in admitting that your longing does not always align with your well-being, and there is freedom in trusting that what is withheld may be withheld for a reason beyond your present understanding. Over time, patterns begin to emerge. You may look back and notice that certain disappointments rerouted you toward environments where your character deepened, where your compassion grew, where your purpose clarified. Had the original door remained open, you might have bypassed those formative spaces entirely. It is tempting to romanticize what never happened. The mind edits out potential difficulties and magnifies imagined joys. But reality is rarely as flawless as our projections. The door that closed might have led to subtle compromises, quiet loneliness, or gradual erosion of integrity. You were not denied because you were forgotten. You may have been redirected because you were valued. Protection is often misunderstood because it disguises itself as prevention. We celebrate what we gain more readily than what we are spared. Yet being spared can be one of the greatest gifts. The challenge is to trust before you have evidence, to believe that a blocked path may conceal care rather than indifference. When a door closes, you stand in a hallway of uncertainty. It feels narrow, it feels confining. But hallways are transitional spaces, not permanent residences. If one entrance has shut, another will eventually open, though it may lead somewhere you did not initially consider. The wisdom lies not in forcing the closed door to reopen, but in asking what the closure is teaching you. Is it cultivating patience? Is it reshaping your priorities? Is it loosening your grip on something that was becoming an idol? Disappointment can harden the heart or refine it. The difference depends on interpretation. If you view the closed door as rejection, bitterness grows. If you consider it protection, trust grows. And trust transforms the way you walk forward. You move with less desperation, less frantic striving. You begin to understand that not every no is a barrier. Some are boundaries set by love, and boundaries, though uncomfortable, are designed not to limit your future but to preserve it. There is a peculiar kind of emptiness that success cannot fill. It is subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, hidden beneath achievements and applause. You reach a milestone you once prayed for. You accomplish what you believed would finally quiet your anxieties. You obtain the position, the recognition, the stability, perhaps even the admiration of others. And for a brief moment, there is satisfaction. But then, unexpectedly, the silence returns. Not the peaceful kind, but a hollow echo that asks a question you cannot easily answer. Is this all? That question is not a sign of ingratitude. It is not weakness. It is a signal. Restlessness often reveals what comfort tries to conceal. When life is difficult, we assume that relief will solve everything. We tell ourselves that once the struggle ends, contentment will naturally follow. Yet history and experience consistently show that external achievement does not guarantee internal peace. The human soul was not designed to be sustained by accomplishment alone. It was designed for something deeper, something that transcends the visible markers of progress. Restlessness is frequently misunderstood because it feels inconvenient. After all, you worked hard to arrive here. You sacrificed, persevered, endured uncertainty. To finally stand on stable ground and still feel unsettled seems unfair. So you try to silence the feeling. You distract yourself with more goals, more noise, more consumption. You assume the solution is to climb higher, move faster, gather more. But what if the unease is not an enemy to conquer, but a messenger to heed? There is a difference between ambition and alignment. Ambition pushes you forward. Alignment roots you in purpose. You can move quickly in a direction that impresses others yet quietly contradicts who you are becoming. Restlessness emerges when there is a gap between outer success and inner truth. It whispers that you are thriving in areas that do not fully nourish your spirit. It nudges you to question whether the ladder you are climbing is leaning against the right wall. This is not a call to abandon responsibility or dismiss healthy goals. It is an invitation to examine motivation. Why did you want this in the first place? Was it born from genuine calling or from comparison? Did you pursue it because it reflected your values or because it promised validation? The world has a subtle way of shaping desires. It tells you what is impressive, what is worthy of praise, what is considered meaningful, and without realizing it, you may adopt those definitions as your own. Restlessness interrupts that adoption. It challenges borrowed dreams. It exposes pursuits that look admirable on the outside but feel empty within. Some of the most transformative moments in life begin with dissatisfaction that cannot be explained by circumstance. You have enough, yet something feels missing. You are surrounded by people, yet you sense isolation. You are busy, yet strangely unfulfilled. That tension is uncomfortable, but it is also clarifying. It forces you to confront the possibility that you were made for more than accumulation and approval. The soul longs for coherence. It desires unity between belief and behavior, between conviction and action. When those elements drift apart, unease surfaces. This restlessness can be misinterpreted as failure. You may assume something is wrong with you for not feeling complete, but perhaps the incompleteness is evidence of design. Our thirst proves the existence of water. Hunger implies the existence of nourishment. In the same way, spiritual restlessness implies that there is something capable of satisfying it. The mistake is attempting to quench a spiritual thirst with material substitutes. No amount of recognition can replace purpose. No level of comfort can substitute for meaning. No applause can echo loudly enough to silence a conscience that knows it was created for depth. There is also humility embedded in restlessness. It reminds you that you are not self-sufficient. You cannot manufacture lasting peace through sheer determination. You cannot construct fulfillment purely through strategy. Something greater must anchor you. When success fails to provide stability, it exposes the fragile foundation upon which you may have been standing, and though that exposure feels unsettling, it is merciful. It prevents you from building your entire identity upon something that cannot bear the weight of your soul. Restlessness often precedes redirection. It loosens your grip on what you once idolized. It invites reflection instead of relentless striving. It encourages stillness in a culture addicted to motion. If you are brave enough to sit with it rather than suppress it, it can reveal profound truths about who you are and what truly matters. You may discover that what you need is not more achievement, but deeper connection. Not greater visibility, but clearer purpose. Not louder affirmation, but quieter faithfulness. There is courage required to admit that success has not satisfied you. It risks misunderstanding from others who assume you should be content. But contentment cannot be forced by external expectations. It must grow from internal alignment. When your actions reflect your deepest convictions, peace follows more naturally. The restlessness fades, not because circumstances have drastically changed, but because your direction has. You begin to pursue what resonates with eternity, rather than what merely impresses the present moment. In this way, restlessness becomes less of a threat and more of a guide. It is a spiritual signal, gently but persistently reminding you that you were not created to settle for surfaces. You were designed for depth, for communion, for purpose that outlives applause. And until you move toward that deeper calling, it is a humbling thought that truth often arrives through ordinary voices. We expect revelation to descend in extraordinary ways, unmistakable and dramatic, yet more often it comes disguised as conversation. A friend says something in passing that lingers longer than expected. A stranger shares a perspective that unsettles your certainty. A line from a sermon, a sentence from a book, a quiet piece of advice from someone older. These moments appear small, yet they carry unusual weight. You cannot always explain why certain words stay with you while others fade, but you feel the difference. It is as though something beneath the surface has been gently touched. We are not as independent as we imagine. Though we cherish the idea of forming our beliefs in isolation, much of our understanding is shaped in relationship. This is not weakness, it is design. We were formed for connection, and through connection, refinement occurs. Sometimes the very person you least expect becomes the instrument of clarity. It may be someone you disagree with, someone outside your circle, someone whose life looks very different from your own. Truth does not always arrive wrapped in familiarity. In fact, its unfamiliarity is often what makes it disruptive. When a perspective challenges your assumptions, your first instinct may be resistance. Pride rises quickly. It defends your current worldview because that worldview feels safe. To reconsider is to risk instability. Yet growth requires instability. A tree cannot extend its roots deeper without disturbing the soil. In the same way, the heart cannot mature without occasionally being unsettled. When someone speaks a truth that pierces your defenses, the discomfort you feel may be evidence that something necessary has been exposed. It is tempting to dismiss such moments. You can label the speaker as naive, overly critical, or simply mistaken. You can tell yourself they do not understand your situation. And sometimes that may even be partially true. that occasionally, hidden within imperfect delivery, there is a fragment of wisdom meant specifically for you. The challenge is to separate tone from truth. Even flawed messengers can carry accurate messages. If you reject every word because of who delivered it, you may miss guidance intended for your good. Consider how often pivotal changes in life begin with a conversation, a warning that prevents a destructive decision, an encouragement that restores courage when you are ready to quit, a question that forces you to examine motives you had not scrutinized before. These exchanges rarely feel monumental at the time. They occur in kitchens, in cars, in casual settings. Yet later you trace back the shift in your direction and realize it began with someone else's words. There's also mystery in why certain phrases strike with unusual force. You may have heard similar advice before, but this time it lands differently. Perhaps your circumstances have prepared you to receive it. Perhaps your heart has softened just enough to listen. Timing plays a quiet but powerful role in transformation. The same sentence can be ignored one year and embraced the next. It is not merely the content that changes, it is the readiness of the listener. This suggests that truth is not only spoken, it is received, and reception requires humility. To acknowledge that someone else might see what you cannot is to admit limitation. Yet limitation is not failure, it is human reality. No one has complete perspective. Others notice blind spots we cannot detect from within ourselves. They observe patterns in our behavior, inconsistencies in our reasoning, contradictions between our words and action. When they reflect these observations back to us, it can feel intrusive. But reflection is not attack. It can be an invitation to alignment. There is also encouragement embedded in this dynamic. Just as others can warn you, they can also affirm you. Sometimes you underestimate your own capacity. You shrink from opportunities because doubt has convinced you of inadequacy. Then someone speaks belief into your hesitation. They see strength where you see weakness. They recognize potential you have overlooked. Their confidence becomes a mirror, showing you a version of yourself you had not fully embraced. In this way, truth through others is not always corrective. It is often restorative. It calls you back to who you are meant to be. Of course, not every opinion deserves equal weight. Discernment remains essential, but discernment differs from defensiveness. One evaluates thoughtfully, the other rejects automatically. When you cultivate a posture of openness without gullibility, you create space for meaningful guidance. You begin to listen not merely for agreement, but for insight. You pay attention to recurring themes in what trusted voices tell you. Patterns matter. If different people in different contexts gently point toward the same concern or encouragement, it may be wise to consider that something larger is at work. The idea that truth frequently comes through people underscores the relational nature of spiritual growth. You are not intended to navigate life alone. Isolation can amplify distortion, allowing unchecked assumptions to solidify into conviction. Community, though imperfect, provides correction and clarity. It challenges extremes and tempers impulses. Through dialogue, perspective expands. Through shared experience, empathy deepens. When someone's words unexpectedly illuminate your path, it is worth pausing rather than dismissing. Ask why it resonated. Reflect on what it reveals about your current direction. Do not rush to defend. Allow yourself to consider. The voice of truth is not always loud, but when it passes through another person, it often carries a weight that lingers long after the conversation ends. In those lingering moments, transformation quietly begins. There is a peculiar and often uncomfortable reality in life. Silence and hardship are among the most effective ways in which the soul is shaped. We imagine that answers should arrive quickly, that prayers should produce immediate results, and that the presence of guidance should be obvious and unmistakable. When these expectations are not met, we grow impatient. We wonder if our efforts have been ignored or if our prayers have fallen into an empty void. We feel as though the universe or God has turned away, leaving us to struggle alone. Yet silence is rarely absence. It is often preparation. It is the space in which understanding takes root. It is the quiet forge where character is tested and refined. When life appears unresponsive, when doors seem closed and voices are absent, it is not a sign that you have been abandoned. It may be a signal that you are being equipped for something far greater than you currently comprehend. Hardship works in a similar, though more tangible way. The sudden loss, the unexpected failure, the heartbreak that shakes your foundation, all of these experiences have a peculiar power to strip away illusions. They remove the comfort of certainty and force confrontation with reality. While joy and comfort often obscure hidden weaknesses, difficulty exposes them. It reveals where reliance is misplaced and where resilience must grow. Pain has a way of sharpening perception in ways that ease cannot. It makes the soul more receptive to truths that might otherwise be ignored. Many people live their lives without ever noticing the subtle guidance that comes in ordinary circumstances. But when calamity strikes, there is no distraction from reality. Hardship demands attention, and in that demand lies opportunity. It is in moments of struggle that the heart begins to ask questions it would not have considered in tranquility. Why am I here? What am I pursuing? Who am I becoming? These questions are often uncomfortable, yet they are essential. They are the questions that provoke growth, self-examination, and eventual transformation. Silence and hardship also teach patience, an often underestimated virtue. Waiting is rarely easy. Humans are naturally inclined to seek control, to hasten outcomes, and to demand immediate evidence. Yet the most profound growth often occurs slowly, imperceptibly. The period of waiting, when answers seem absent, is not wasted. It is the interval in which insight matures and in which preparation occurs unseen. The discomfort of not knowing, the tension of uncertainty, is a silent tutor, instructing the heart in ways that comfort cannot. There is a subtle irony in this process. We tend to resist difficulty, striving to remove it, evade it, or suppress it. Yet by doing so, we also resist the formation of qualities that only emerge through endurance, humility, compassion, courage, and clarity. When we embrace silence and hardship as teachers rather than punishers, we begin to see that they are indispensable companions on the journey of life. They have a way of opening our eyes to dimensions of existence that would remain hidden otherwise. Consider how many decisions are made impulsively when life is easy, only to lead to regret. In times of quiet struggle, however, reflection becomes necessary. Hardship slows the pace of life, forcing us to examine motivations, intentions, and consequences. It clarifies priorities and exposes the true nature of desires. It distinguishes between what is fleeting and what is lasting. Silence and hardship also cultivate dependence on something beyond oneself. When we are self-sufficient, we often forget the existence of forces greater than our own understanding. We act as though the world must bend to our will, that solutions must appear on our timetable, and that guidance should always be obvious. Hardship dismantles this illusion. It reminds us that life is not entirely under our control, and it invites humility. It teaches that true resilience is not measured solely by effort or intellect, but by trust, patience, and openness to unseen wisdom. In many ways, hardship is a teacher of perspective. It gives depth to gratitude, reminding us of the value of comfort and ease when they return. It enhances empathy, allowing us to recognize suffering in others because we have experienced it ourselves. It instills courage as we learn to navigate uncertainty and adversity without surrendering. It fosters insight as we begin to perceive patterns and connections that were invisible in untroubled times. Silence and hardship are rarely welcome. They challenge pride and disrupt expectation. They demand reflection and patience. Yet within these experiences lies opportunity for transformation that cannot be achieved through ease alone. The moments when guidance feels absent are often the moments in which our receptivity is being prepared. The moments of trial are often the moments in which wisdom is being cultivated. To endure silence and hardship with awareness is to participate in the hidden curriculum of the soul, one that shapes character, clarifies purpose, and deepens understanding. Eventually, the meaning behind these difficult experiences may become apparent. You may look back and see how each period of silence preserved you from decisions made too hastily. You may recognize how each hardship strengthened your capacity for empathy and resilience. You may understand how every unanswered question invited reflection, humility, and alignment with truth. And in that recognition, gratitude arises, not for the pain itself, but for the growth it produced, the wisdom it nurtured, and the preparation it provided for what is to come. The key is to endure with openness, to resist bitterness, and to trust that absence of visible guidance does not imply absence of care. Silence and hardship, though often misunderstood, are instruments of formation, shaping a heart and mind capable of receiving insight, embracing purpose, and walking faithfully through life's unseen current. And so, if God tried to reach you 7 times, it was not to punish or frustrate you. It was to guide, to protect, to awaken something within you that could not be forced, only invited. Every whisper, every closed door, every restless moment, every word from another, every silence, and every hardship, all of it was love moving toward you, shaping you, preparing you for a life larger than you imagined. The question now is not whether he tried, but whether you will finally listen. Will you pause, reflect, and recognize the guidance woven through your life? Will you allow the 7th attempt to awaken a heart that is ready to respond? The journey is not about perfection or understanding every step. It is about awakening to the mercy that has never stopped pursuing you and embracing the path that leads to the purpose you were always meant to fulfill.